everybody, Debbie here with Garden Style. So I'm here today with Grow More in 24, and here's our third video for the month of April. What is there to do in the garden in April? Well, just about everything. So I'm going to start off with my list and try and give you some details on some of the things I'm getting ready to discuss. So before I get started, I just wanted to let you know that it is a beautiful, somewhat 60-degree day. It's a little breezy today, a little windy, so I'm hoping that doesn't affect the audio on this particular video. But gonna take the chance anyway, and here we go. All right, so pruning. Gonna mention that first because you've had February and March to get your pruning done. April is the perfect month to start pruning a lot of your evergreen shrubs, like if you want to take them way down. And I'm talking about shrubs that aren't getting ready to bloom yet. But if you've had a gnarly shrub in your yard that you're just ready to take down by at least half, April is the perfect month to do that. So there's a lot less stress on the shrub, and it has plenty of grow time to fill back in. So pruning your evergreens and shrubs, just make sure they're done blooming and not getting ready to bloom before you go about pruning them. Another thing that starts to crop its ugly head during the month of April is weed control. So if you haven't mulched your beds already, use the month of April to start getting a layer of mulch down in all of your beds so that you're cutting back on the weeds. And all the mulch is going to do is start to help you during the spring and the summer months as we start to get warmer by holding moisture in the soil, as opposed to the winter time when it is helping to keep your plants warm and protected. During the spring and the summer, it still protects the roots from the heat, as well as holding in moisture and keeping out weeds. So mulch is super important during this time of the year. As you probably already know, the weeds are already poking their ugly heads through the soil. And pull what you can, mulch what you can, but get on top of them now before they get really, really obnoxious. So weed control is good. Any irrigation systems that you may have, whether it's soaker hoses or a drip system, now's a good time to start setting those back up, checking all your hoses, setting up your timers, because as we start to get closer into May and June and we have more days in between the rain, just means your plants are drying out that much faster, especially any new transplants that you may have. So I highly recommend setting up an irrigation of some sort. I'm going through and checking all my soaker hoses that I currently have here in the yard just to make sure they made it through the winter okay and nothing needs repair. But yeah, get them all hooked up, test them out, and make sure that they're working properly so that you're not doing this last minute during the summer when it gets really hot. So good time to check your irrigation. Another really important thing you need to do during the month of April is fertilizing. So if you haven't started yet, now's the time to start putting it down, and I mean fertilize everything. And I would recommend a soil test kit. So if you're not sure what your acid level is in the soil or what your alkaline levels are, test your soil first, and you can usually find these soil test kits in your local nurseries. We all have them. And they usually allow you to test at least 5 or 6 different areas in the yard. So if you're not sure where your pH levels are, I would recommend that you find that out first before you start applying fertilizer. Because in some instances, especially here in the Northwest, if you have really acidic soil, you don't need to be adding, like for instance, a holly-tone to the soil because it's already acidic. And what holly-tone will do is make it even more acidic. And if that's the case and you still want to feed your plants, then go ahead and use an all-purpose plant tone or a garden tone to your plants, and that will certainly give them the food that they need, most likely for the rest of the year. And I'm talking trees, shrubs, and perennials. But yeah, soil test kit is very important. And some sure signs that you have really acidic soil, for instance, is moss. Moss will grow anywhere where it is really acidic. And the way to neutralize that is by adding lime, and that helps to neutralize the soil and bring it up to a point where the moss can't survive anymore. That's where a lot of your moss controls come in. They help to neutralize the soil, so it creates an inhospitable environment for moss to grow. So, and that's usually a big problem for us here in the Northwest. At least I know it is for me. Anything that's in the shade usually has a layer of moss on it, like my lawn, for instance. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a layer of lime over my lawn where it's wanting to grow nothing but moss. and kill that off first, and then I'm going to thatch it this year. I'm way overdue to thatch my lawn, so I'm going to have that done, and then go through and start feeding it and overseeding it. Overseeding this is the perfect time of the year to start overseeding your lawn while it's still cool at night. The rye and fescue grasses that we have growing here in the Northwest really like the cooler weather. As you'll notice during the summertime, if you can't keep up the watering, your grasses are going to automatically go dormant and go brown. That's just how they work here in the Northwest. Where if you live down in the South, it's the opposite. Their grasses down there usually go dormant in the wintertime and go brown and start to turn green and stay that way through the spring and the summer. So it just depends on what part of the hemisphere that you live. But anyway, fertilizing is super important. Get that going. And of course, get a test kit at your local garden center if you don't already have one. Okay, this is the part of the year that I love the most. The month of April is the time for planting. And I can't wait. So April can be a little tricky depending on where your zone is. Now here in zone 8, usually our frost date lands around April 15th. They say that's the average frost date, but I can guarantee you I have seen frost all the way into May. So it's a good idea before you start putting out really tender annuals and vegetables that you kind of take a look at the 10-day forecast, and I would wait till after April 15th to start putting in plants like your geraniums, petunias, calibrachoas, a lot of your tender veggies, for instance like your corn, tomatoes for sure. We already have people coming in asking for tomato plants, and I just tell them no, wait. You want to be able to have your temperatures at least 45 and above consistently for at least 10 days before you even think about putting in tomato plants, especially here in the Northwest, because we can get a sudden cold and that's going to stunt their growth, and you'll just wish you waited. I have planted tender perennials, tender annuals too early, and have found out that it stunted the growth and it takes them forever to recover from it. So you're much better waiting 10, 15 days where those overnight temperatures start to stay a little more moderate and don't get anywhere near the low 40s. And once that happens, then you can feel pretty safe about planting your containers, going out and buying hanging baskets and things like that. But I know it's hard. It's hard to wait. You can certainly buy your plants now, but just hold them and hold them in a protected place until you are able to get out in the yard and get them planted. Now, as far as tender annuals and veggies go, things like begonias, impatiens are even more tender than say your geraniums and petunias. And honestly, I just wait till May before I start planting those types of plants, and that way I know I'm completely in the safe zone as far as having anything too cold for them, because they're very, very sensitive to that. And we purposely don't bring in those types of plants until later on, around the beginning of May, just for that reason. Coleus is another one that's just coming to my head right off the bat. But yeah, watch those overnight temperatures before you start putting out those more tender type plants. But meanwhile, you are perfectly safe to start planting your own hanging baskets rather than going and buying one pre-planted already. Usually the pre-planted baskets, if you buy them too soon in the season, usually around the end of April, if you're buying them by then, they're usually burnt out and done by the time you get to August. But if you go in and you buy all the smaller plants and start planting all your baskets, usually they last a little bit longer for you, as long as you're fertilizing them on a regular basis and of course keeping them well watered. So fuchsia baskets, for instance, this is a perfect time to go out, find your fuchsia starts and get them started in your own baskets, and that way you can save your baskets from year to year and just keep replanting them, or you can hold them over in the garage. And you can look up one of my videos from the past and I explain to you how you can hold over your fuchsia baskets in the wintertime in your garage. Let them go dormant and then just pull them back out in the spring when you see temperatures are 45 and above at night. Start watering and fertilizing them and you will have them come right back for you. Usually twice the size as they were the year before, just because their roots are already established in the pot. Now what I have done for my fuchsia baskets is I will literally pull the whole plant out of the basket, cut off half of the root system, put in some new soil and put it back into the basket, and that way they'll just keep going and going and going throughout the spring and the summer. So tricky month in April when it comes to planting those more tender plants, and I know you're excited to do it, but just be careful and keep an eye on the overnight temps. Now, as far as spring bulbs go, like your dahlias, gladiolas, alliums, now is the time. Go ahead and start putting those in the ground and getting them planted. Of course, trees, shrubs, fruit trees. If you still haven't planted any fruit trees, you still have time to get those in the ground so there's not too much stress. And of course, get your containers ready. I usually start to get real serious about my annuals towards the end of April. Like you, I'm going to be watching those overnight temperatures, but I'm really anxious to get some color into my containers. And you'll start to find lots and lots of those coming in earlier into the nurseries. And of course, if you have a greenhouse, you can easily hold them over until you're confident that the overnight temps are going to be okay. All right, transplanting. This is probably getting to be about the last month that's safe enough for you to start moving plants around in the yard. So if you have shrubs in the wrong place or perennials, now is the time to start moving them and get them transplanted and well watered. By the time you start to get into May and June, it's starting to get a little late to be moving those types of plants. So any transplanting you need to do, get it done during the month of April, because you're already pushing it. Most of that transplanting should have happened in March, but you're still okay during April to get those things moved. Let's see. Another quick tip for you, if you're going to be moving shrubs, sometimes cutting them back, say for instance a hydrangea or some type of evergreen shrub, sometimes it's better to cut them back to relieve some of that stress when you get ready to wreck their root ball, pull them out of the ground and move them to a new home. So cutting them back does help as far as cutting back on the stress. As we get towards the end of April and beginning of May, you can move some of your houseplants outside. But I would recommend being very careful about transitioning them from the inside to the outside. Maybe take 2 or 3 days and put them outside during the day, bring them in at night. Do the same thing the second day, take them outside, bring them in at night to let them get used to it. But the last thing you want to do is put them in the full sun. You want to make sure they're in the shade, somewhere on the porch where they're somewhat protected, but your houseplants will flourish outside during the summertime. It's just the extra light, fresh air, the water. Houseplants just seem to do really well, but just be careful where you're putting them so that their leaves aren't getting burned the moment you put them outside. Okay, along with transplanting, the next great thing to do is to start dividing your perennials, especially. I've gone out to my perennial bed and I've noticed that some of my perennials are like 3 times the size they were last year, and they're starting to creep into other plants. So this is a good time to start digging them up and dividing them and moving them around or giving them to the neighbors, put them in a container. But if you're going to do some dividing, now's the time to do it. Try and get all of that done during the month of April. Okay, daffodils, tulips, as soon as they are done blooming, go ahead and cut the blooms off, but leave the foliage. You want to let the foliage die back on most of your bulbs because they're continuing to reserve energy into their bulbs, and they need their leaves to do that in order to give you a nice, flow of blooms for the following year. So don't cut the foliage back. Just let it die back naturally, and as soon as it's to the point where you can't stand it anymore, it's probably time to go ahead and cut them back. By then, they have stored the energy that they need for the following spring. Okay, let's see. What else can we be doing during the month of April? Clean up your fountains, clean up your bird baths, clean out your bird feeders. Now's the time. I've cleaned out all my bird baths. I've flipped them over, filled them up with water, and the birds are already taking full advantage of it. So, awesome. It's pretty neat. Let's see. Of course, you want to be power washing your walkways. Get all your power washing done before you start going in to plant so that you're not splashing dirt, grime, and everything else all over your garden beds. Go ahead and get that done now before you start doing the fun stuff, which is planting your beds. Okay, feeding and overseeding your lawn. Extremely important. If you have thick moss in it, like I do right now, I'm going to put a moss killer on first, and then I'm going to thatch it. And I recommend thatching your lawn once every 2 to 3 years, just so you can keep it lush and green. It gets the air down into the roots. And of course, overseed it so you can add some new seed to the lawn and keep it nice and thick. The thicker your lawn, the less weeds you're going to have in your lawn. So it's always a good idea to keep that going. And of course, reseeding any bare spots, things like that are starting to show up in your lawn. And fertilize. I start to fertilize towards the middle to end of April when I'm done doing all my other treatments to the lawn, and I'll treat it again at the end of May, beginning of June, and then I stop. I only fertilize a couple times in the spring, and then I'll do it a couple times in the fall. And that's all your lawn is going to need besides ample water, making sure it gets plenty of water during the summer. Okay, something else I would recommend if you have a big yard and you have a lot of areas that need mulch in order to keep the weeds out, another great thing to do is just buy more plants. If you have a lot of holes in between all your plants, that's just invitation for weeds to move in. So I would recommend planting more plants. The more you can cover the soil with foliage or mulch, the less weeds you're going to be tackling during the spring and the summertime. That's always the bane of our existence as gardeners. And I can promise you, I've been in this house probably for about 10 years, and I mulch my garden beds every 2 years or so. And it's a real fine bark mulch that I put down, and not only is it breaking down and helping to feed the plants, but it's keeping the weeds out, keeps the roots protected in the winter, and keeps the moisture in during the summer. So I can't recommend it enough. Put some mulch down in your beds and you'll have a whole lot less weeds. I know I do here. All right, what else did I want to cover with you guys? Oh, I would recommend not buying all of your plants to fill the yard during April and May. Leave some holes. Check with your nursery during June and July and pick up some more plants that happen to be blooming at that time or in their season at that time, and then buy some more in the fall. And that way you're guaranteed to have more of a 4-season garden rather than having everything busting out into bloom during April, May, June, and then nothing. And that's what I've been doing, is I've been slowly adding to my spring garden, so I'm having more blooms, and slowly adding to my fall garden. Summer seems pretty easy, being I have a really hot perennial bed that I'm constantly adding more plants to. But you also want to add some color for the early part of the season as well as the late season, and that just keeps the garden going and going and going all season round. Okay. Any problem plants that you may have. I have several problem plants. They're either got damaged by the frost, or they're constantly getting diseases or bugs of some sort, or they just don't look good anymore. Tear them out. Just rip them out. There's no sense trying to revive them year after year. Just pull them out and replace them with some brand new plants. And not only will you feel better, but your garden will look better as well, and it will certainly appreciate it if you're pulling out those 1 or 2 plants that are just constantly catching some sort of a disease. For instance, I have a couple plants that get powdery mildew on them every single year. It doesn't seem to matter how much I treat them, they're just vulnerable to powdery mildew. And I'm done. I'm done fighting them. I'm going to yank them out this year and replace them with something that's a little more disease resistant. And read your tags on your plants before you purchase them. And most of the time, the tags will tell you what they're resistant to. They're coming out with new hybrids, new varieties constantly all the time that are very resistant. And will just make your life as a gardener much easier. Okay, so that is a huge do list for April. Because we are now in that transition time. Just watch your temperatures at night before you get too excited about planting your annuals and your tender veggies, and you'll be fine. But for the most part, you can continue to keep planting shrubs and trees all the way through till the end of May. So how exciting is that? We're finally at a point where we can pull the furniture out and enjoy the outdoors, which is probably one of my favorite things to do. All right, you guys, of course, if you have any comments or questions, you can leave those in the description box down below. You can also take advantage of our newsletter. You can go to sunnycrestnursery.com. We're going to be coming out with a newsletter bi-monthly now for April, May, and June, being this is our busiest time of the year. So feel free to sign up for those. And yeah, stay out there, get your hands dirty. Now the real fun begins. We can finally start planting. Okay, keep those hands dirty, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.